We're going to break down three prospects that fans are not talking about when it comes to the Toronto Blue Jays. And these guys could be some sleeper dark horse names to watch going forward. So I'll have that and much more coming up next. Welcome in, everybody, to Jays Digest. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, we're in this time of the offseason now where other teams are playing baseball, where teams like the New York Mets, who started off the season horribly, are now in the NLCS. Teams that won their division are now eliminated, like the Philadelphia Phillies. You just never know what could happen in playoff baseball, which makes it even more disappointing that the Blue Jays didn't get into the dance, pretty much, to put it lightly. But we can focus on the offseason now, and we can focus on some guys that we might be seeing down the line and that might help accelerate this retool that the Blue Jays are currently going through. And I think three of these guys that we're going to break down today, Nick, could definitely play a part in that. And they're very interesting names that we have heard in passing, but they're not really the focus of the Blue Jays minor league system, which is why we wanted to show them some love today.
Yeah, and obviously the Jays got a bunch of prospects at the trade deadline that we've covered pretty extensively. Jake Bloss, guys like that, Ricky Tiedemann. But an article dropped, and we're going to break it down. There's three prospects here that, like you mentioned, a lot of fans aren't talking about, and maybe they should talk about them a little bit more. Three Blue Jays prospects whose stock could dramatically rise this fall. And again, you mentioned it. I mean, the playoffs are on the go now. Philadelphia Phillies got eliminated. The Orioles got eliminated way back. Like, so many things can happen in the playoffs. It hurts that much more if the Jays fell out of the race totally. But now we can shift our focus to the offseason like we've been doing. Let's start with the first prospect here in Kendry Ramos. And we actually mentioned him, I believe, like a while ago on the channel, just briefly. But he's a 21-year-old. They signed him as a 17-year-old in the international free agency pool back in 2020. And he spent 4 seasons in Toronto's system, compiling a 3.28 ERA over 54 appearances, including 42 starts and 211 innings. But he missed nearly 3 months due to a shoulder issue. But if you remember, he dominated high A Vancouver with a 2.16 ERA and 56 strikeouts in 50 innings following his July 9th return. And that was obviously during the Jays' regular season, so the focus was mainly on the big league club. But Peter, he had a very impressive, he's our ranked number 12 prospect now according to MLB Pipeline. He's a lefty. He had a very impressive stretch there since July 9th, since returning from his injury. And a guy that we got way back as a 17-year-old in 2020. He's a guy to definitely keep an eye out on going forward, and someone we're going to be covering because those numbers in high A Vancouver were really unbelievable. 2.16 ERA in 50 innings is nothing to laugh at. And again, he's another lefty that the Jays have in their system that hopefully will stay healthy and prove to be decent.
Yeah, well, before I give my thoughts on Rojas, I wanted to change my hat here for any of you that had any problem with it in previous videos. I was wearing a Pirates cap. I didn't know that was not allowed. I'm obviously a Toronto Blue Jays fan, and I obviously care deeply about this team. So don't take it the wrong way if you see me wearing a Pirates cap. It's just a nice logo. Do you not think it's a nice logo, Nick? I don't know.
It is a good logo.
It's a nice cap. It's a nice cap. It's black. It's plain. It's a P. My name is Peter. I don't know. Whatever, man. Whatever. It's not that big of a deal. But let's talk about Kendry Rojas here, Nick. So he's a lefty, like you mentioned, guy that kind of sits in the low to mid 90s, 92, 93, could reach 94, 95 at times. And he's got I have his grades pulled up here. He's got a 55 fastball grade, a 55 slider grade, 45 on the changeup, and 50 on the control. And he's 45 overall as a prospect. So he's spent the majority of his time here in high A ball with the Vancouver Canadians, which is obviously a pretty competitive league. And he did well. Like you mentioned there, the numbers pretty solid. The walks kept them in check pretty decently. And lefties, they're hard to find, especially lefties that are starting pitchers that are consistent and can control the baseball. So it's nice to see him developing here. Still very young, still 21 years old. And we don't know how he's going to develop going forward, but his numbers are solid. And if he can stay healthy, which seemed to have been an issue as well, it seems to be an issue with any Toronto Blue Jays prospect, then we're cooking. We're cooking here. But he's got to stay on the field and he's got to be able to develop from the start to the finish of the season because we know how crucial each and every start is when you're trying to make the big leagues and when you're developing in the minors.
Yeah, and ultimately, you mentioned it. Health has been a issue for all Blue Jays prospects, but especially for a guy who's climbing up the system as fast as Rojas is, it's going to be exciting to see what happens with him. But next on the list is Lazaro Estrada, and there's some interesting things regarding him. So obviously you can see here he renewed his contract recently with the Toronto Blue Jays. He made great progress last year, 3.29 ERA and almost 100 innings pitched, and he was chosen among the Jays' top prospects to play in the Arizona Fall League. And another guy who was signed, this time as a 17-year-old in 2018. He had a very good year last year, and again, according to Matthew Rowell, if you've watched some of his games, he features a low to mid-90s fastball, but its combination of extreme ride and his uphill attack angle makes it a tricky pitch for hitters to pick up. He's also been known for a strong curveball that tunnels well off his fastball, above average control, and average command. His advanced age for the level is more of a product of lost development years and visa issue than lack of production. So again, he was a 17-year-old in 2018, so now he's in his mid-20s, which is why he's a bit of an older prospect. But again, according to one of the prospect insiders here, he basically said it was not because of lack of production, but rather lost development years and a visa issue. So this is a guy that I haven't heard too much of it all either. They obviously renewed his contract according to Francis Romero, and he had a very good year last year. I feel like a lot of Jays prospects that kind of flew under the radar had great years last year, but because of how bad the Jays season was, it wasn't talked about as much as it may would have been if the Jays had a bit of a less of a disaster class season.
Yeah, well, there's a lack of top prospects in the Blue Jays farm system, which is why not many people talk about it altogether. I believe that they do have some intriguing young talent in there, but it lacks high top end talent, which maybe a team like the Orioles have, or other teams around Major League Baseball, which is why a lot of these guys fly under the radar. And to me, the fact that he is 25 and only made his Double A debut this year, I think that is kind of a warning sign. Maybe he is a late bloomer, but I understand all the other stuff there that did happen with the visa and the injury issues. But still, you'd like to see a little bit more progression from a guy who, especially signed when he was 17 years old, right? Like I get it. Maybe he couldn't come over right away, and maybe he couldn't rise through your ranks, but what was he doing in those years when he wasn't here, or when he wasn't able to pitch in the minors for you? So hopefully he can continue to develop. Hopefully that's a name that we hear more of going forward, because he did have a good season, like you mentioned, Nick. And again, we didn't know too much about this guy coming into this video. We had to do a little bit of research, but he seems like an intriguing guy, a big guy as well, and someone that can throw some heat and has some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, and ultimately, you mentioned it. Someone that we're going to keep an eye out on. He is 25, so he's kind of not running out of time by any means, but he's going to have to really dominate Double A and hopefully Triple A this year if he makes it there to make an impact into the top prospect list. But finally, a guy we've discussed on this channel might be a bit more familiar to you all is TJ Brock, their 6th-round pick a couple years ago in 2022. Known for his swing and miss stuff. He has a high 80s slider. He has a fastball in the mid 90s. He's an interesting guy, and again, he's a bit of an older prospect, and that's why a lot of these guys haven't been talked about as much, as the Jays went ahead at the trade deadline and really retooled their system with a lot of the young guys. But this is another guy dealing with injuries. He spent a significant amount of time on the injured list. The AFL, Arizona Fall League, gives him a chance to get in more work, but he only managed 7 innings at Double A last year. So another guy riddled with injuries. There was one point where he was a pretty highly touted prospect in the Jays system. Obviously, their sixth round pick, back in 2022. But for a 6th-round pick, hopefully he has some upside here going forward. But this is an interesting one. Another guy riddled with injuries, like a lot of the prospects in the Jays system this year and last year.
And he might get an opportunity because the Blue Jays need some guys in the bullpen, which has been very well documented by the two of us ever since the offseason has started for them. And I don't know what their course of action is going to be. Are they going to go out there and get guys on the free agent market, trade for guys like they did with Eric Swanson? We don't know with this front office. We never really know. They keep things pretty close to their chest, unless it's that Shohei Ohtani saga that happened last offseason. But Nick, this is an interesting name as well. 6th-round pick in baseball terms is a pretty high draft pick, so you'd like to see him develop and like to see him stay on the field as well, which is all you want to see with your prospects. You just don't want them to get hurt and stunt their growth and delay their Major League Baseball arrival by a year or two, which is what we're seeing now with Ricky Tiedemann, with a lot of other prospects as well. So if he can stay healthy, I think he'll get a legitimate shot. Maybe not right away in the Blue Jays bullpen, but maybe in AAA. And then if he performs well over there and if he can stay healthy, then he'll get a shot because I can't see the Blue Jays acquiring 4 or 5 relief arms, which is realistically what they need heading into next season, considering the way that they just underperformed this year.
Yeah, he's the closest guy simply because he's at the highest level, and they need bullpen arms. And the Toronto Blue Jays hopefully will go out and get some. But let us know in the comments, out of these prospects, which one are you most excited for? And if you're enjoying playoff baseball, continue to enjoy it. It's going to be good, and at least you have no stress because the Jays are out of it. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. We'll see you tomorrow.